Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring minimalist composition, songs that don't have a lot of layers or complexity, but that doesn't mean necessarily that they aren't deep. We're going to be moving into some Joy Division here, looking at the track I Remember Nothing from the Unknown Pleasures album. Let's dive into it and see what Joy Division is bringing to the table today. This song is harmonically interesting. I'll expand on that later. Giving us a bit more of that percussion sound there, coming from the muted guitar. It continues to feel like it's building into something, and it doesn't really get that boost. That section right there did have a little bit of a higher peak to it, but it still wasn't the explosiveness that it seemed to be driving towards. All right. Yeah, this is a good track for minimalist composition because the composition itself is minimal, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a lot going on. We have a drone that sits across the entire track. I don't think it really stops. It's mostly right placed, maybe like center right. It sounds to me like some sort of synth, possibly. Um, we're going to touch on why I think it's possibly later, because I have some questions about the production of this. But yeah, later. A little bit of foreshadowing there. I think there's a synth there, and it just kind of holds this low note out, and it's this foundational sound that everything else is sort of put on top of. From there, we have the drum pattern, which exists throughout the entire song. I don't think that gets changed at all. There is a bass line that pops up a couple of times. We have the palm muted guitar, the eighth notes that pops up. I think the guitar had another idea earlier in the track. I can't remember what that was. But again, very minimal, very simplistic. And then the vocal melody. Zzz. There's kind of two of them. We have the center vocal, which tends to follow along with that core riff, the ostinato, the loop, the melodic idea, changing the words for it. But then we also had a right pan vocal earlier in the track that I don't think ever came back. That sounded like a different vocalist. I'm not entirely sure about that yet. But that had a bit of a different flow and melody to it. And that's all the composition right there. But that doesn't mean that that's all the song. Another bit of foreshadowing there. I do want to focus on what the traditional instruments, we'll call them that. The drums, the bass, the guitar, possibly the synth and the vocals, what everything is doing here. Primarily what we have is atmosphere building from everyone. What the instruments play is rather simple, usually quite sparse as well, looking at the bass and the drums, though even the guitar coming in with those eighth notes is usually just one note acting as like a drone, no different than a synthesizer. However, with the small change that there's a rhythmic component. Rather than just holding this note out, we have the da 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 da, and it creates a rhythmic element that runs alongside and embellishes what the drums are providing on a very sparse level. It creates this extra intensity and momentum in that section of the track. But aside from that one moment, everything is rather sparse. You play a couple of notes, or maybe you have a lot of space between notes, and then you have a bit of a break, a moment of silence, of rest until you start the idea over again, or you go to the next part of the idea. There just isn't a lot of things being played. What is being played harmonically is kind of moody. I don't necessarily want to say that it does build into tension there at the end of the track, but before that, it's sort of this dark ambience. Dark subjectively. I'll put it that way. We've definitely heard some songs that are darker as far as the atmosphere goes, looking at more tense or ominous sounds, but I think that this is aiming for that type of darkness, that type of moodiness. It doesn't necessarily feel antagonistic, but it doesn't feel safe to be here. The vocal delivery adds to that, as there's a slurriness to the notes, to the words. Doesn't necessarily feel like a stand-up citizen is saying all of this with, power and articulation and all that. Although usually the people with the slickest tongues are also the ones you should look out for too. But there's just also something ominous or eerie or basically, I think, unsettling about the vocal delivery. There's a slurringness to it that makes it feel sort of drunken at times. There's a danger there that runs parallel with the eeriness of the music. Atmosphere really is the key to everything. Now, beyond the instruments, though, there are non-traditional instruments. A lot of it percussion. We have crashes and bangs and all sorts of industrial sounds going on. This one adds to the song by filling in the gaps that tend to get shown through the lack of playing, the sparse composition, but it also adds to the atmosphere of it all. It allows the song to have momentum in some of those moments where the momentum slows down, where the song is missing that direction and it sort of just hovers for a little bit. So we'll fill in some of those gaps with these percussion sounds. That's what we'll call them. But they're also very antagonistic as well. A lot of it is smashing, it's banging. They are sounds of violence, of destruction. I think it's interesting to add them to this as it provides an interesting ambience to it all. Particularly because, for whatever reason, I kind of associate this minimal eeriness and the harshness of these industrial sounds. I view them together. I don't know if that's because of swans, but it just fits. The sounds of breaking glass and moody atmospheric post rock like this. I don't know. My brain says yes. We've heard stuff like this before. There's a pattern here. You should expect stuff like this in the future. I don't know why my brain does that, but let me know if anybody else hears this. What was the glass breaking feeling out of place? Or did this seem like the proper song to have field recordings? Or maybe they were really destroying stuff in the studio too. I don't know. Again, we'll get to some of that later. But I think it just fits. And like I said, the violence, the destruction of how they're achieving these sounds absolutely fits with the overall ambience of it all. And I think it just continues to push this idea of ominous, of lacking of safety, the dangerousness of the sound. And it runs parallel with that in a way to augment it and just really drive that feeling home. The song already had an idea of danger. I hear stuff breaking, and I'm like, yeah, this is definitely a dangerous place. I gotta go find another song to chill out inside. I can't wait to get to the lyrics, though, because the few I picked up don't really match well with the feelings I got from the music, and it might have just been those lines. But, yeah, I want to see if there's anything there where there's parallels between the lyrical themes and the musical ones. Now, there is a really strong harmonic concept here. And I mentioned it was interesting during the reaction itself. There are quite a few lines that move in the harmonic direction I expect the song to be, and based off of the very minimal amount of information we have in the foundation of what our chords might be at any given moment, there's ideas in the lead melody, the vocals, that make sense within that realm, within that harmonic information. I'm like, yep, those notes those notes you chose, how you moved between them, the general flow of the melody itself, it's exactly what I would expect. There's other ones that lead into a little bit of slightly expected, if that's a way to describe something. They went into a way that was a bit angular in that it creates some dissonance against the foundation, but it's an expected dissonance, one that I've heard within this phrasing before. And it's a way of taking notes from outside it and bringing it in, coloring outside the lines, spicing up the harmony, whatever you want to call it. It just adds to the tension of the track in a positive way. Usually this kind of stuff would be used as a a tense harmonic element in the chord progression, usually your third chord, to really bring a ton of tension in. That's going to put you towards your final tone or your final chord. That's going to be a leading chord that points you towards the resolution, takes you back home. The third chord is usually a really great place to put this tension. They just hold it out for extended periods, though. I'll just reside within this tension and then release it back to where we were. So it's not necessarily that I wasn't expecting it. I just wasn't expecting them to lean into it for as long as they do in some moments. So we have these two basic modes that they exist between that I think are expected generally within this sound. Mostly harmonious, quite a bit of tension, but still an expected usage of notes within the chord that they're in. There's a third type, though, that I have no context for. To me, it just seems completely dissonant. The note choices make no sense. I've never heard anything like it before, other than just to be tonally disharmonic, to create dissonance. And so the song kind of shifts between this feeling of tension and release that's expected, and then just raw dissonance, something I can't quite put a finger on. It is just noise that happens every once in a while. But it's paired with something else that kind of obscures when those moments are intentional and when they aren't. Because aside from harmonic tension, there's also tonality tension, in that the vocalist doesn't always seem to sing in pitch, in tune with the rest of the instruments. There was one particular case where this kicked it off for me. That was the second vocalist that came in right panned around like a minute and a half in, totally out of tune. Like I said, the timbre sounded different to me. I think it was a second vocalist, but nothing was right. Everything was just a hair bit sharp or flat, and at least to me, he's either acting like or actually doesn't have any vocal training. He's just not a singer. And from that point on, I started listening to the tonality of the main vocalist, and yeah, it kind of drifts in and out of being in tune, sometimes being exactly where I expect, and, introducing some spicy notes even there. But even when there are lines that I expect from the vocalist, sometimes they're just a bit flatter than they should be, creating a ton of tension there as the notes are out of tune. The song almost ends up feeling at one point that there's this struggle to make a harmonious song, and I don't know what the narrative would be. They don't have the chops for it. I mean, obviously they do, right? They can sing in tune when they want to. They can play harmoniously when they want to. But it's like this struggle where the song itself wants to be dissonant, and they have to really fight it to reach this point of harmony. And it's this struggle, this movement back and forth between that, between the dissonance and the consonance. And I think that's an interesting narrative I got from this track. It's not the only time that the song tries to fall apart, though. There's also quite a few sections where, if we're not dealing with sonic issues, we're dealing with rhythmic issues, and that the drummer isn't always on beat. And there are sections where, for a moment, usually at the beginning of a bar, the song feels like it begins to crumble. The drummer's a hair bit late, so the guitar doesn't quite come in at the same time the vocals do, and then it just kind of groups back up together. They find that rhythm, that cohesion again. But there was at least 3 cases in here where I felt the drummer was lagging, dragging every single time. Just couldn't keep up the speed consistently. And between that and the harmonic struggles here, it really does feel like a song that doesn't want to exist, at least not the way that they're trying to force it to be, this harmonious whole where everything fires off at the same time in the same pitch and is just congruent on all levels. I've been struggling with tying this together with the title. I remember nothing. I have some vague ideas there, but I don't think anything worth diving into yet without having looked at the lyrics and piecing it all together with the full context. But while I will say that the song was fine, casually, subjectively, it's not something I think I'm going to come back to. But from an artistic angle, I'm really sucked into this. You have no idea how much I want to get to the lyrics and get that final piece of the puzzle and see if I can't solve this, because my brain is just, it's jumping around between so many ideas. I have a lot of questions regarding it, and I feel like I'm so close to having all the pieces. I just need to solve the mystery, right? What is this song trying to say? And I want to get to that point. But before we dive into the lyrics, there is one thing I need to bring up. The thing I foreshadowed so long ago. Is that a synthesizer? How did all of this come to be? I bring this up because it was released in June of 79. 79. It's 40 years ago. Now, I guess we did have synthesizers, didn't we? Because I keep remembering that. Was it the Beatles? No, it was Pink Floyd. They were using prototype synthesizers in some of their earlier works. So by 79, pretty much the 80s. I mean, the 80s are sort of known for guitars and keyboards and stuff. So, yeah. I don't know what for some reason I was thinking 79 was so long ago, but really it wasn't. I mean, it's still like 4 decades. That's a long time, but okay, I don't know where to take this now that I've had this little bit of revelation. However, it's still a lot older than I thought, based on, and I know this is a digital master of it. It sounds really great and very modern, but I think even without the production cleanliness, it still sounds modern compositionally. I still feel like this is something that somebody could come up with today, even if it's, a bedroom artist. There's a lot of wild, eclectic, experimental things coming out of bedroom artists, and this sounds like something somebody would create, especially given the minimalism of it, which is in vogue right now. We are certainly in a place where simplicity is where we're in full swing on that. And I do feel the pendulum is swinging back. I think in the next 7 years, some of the most popular songs we see in the radios are going to be a bit more complex. The pendulum always does this. But right now, like I said, simplicity is in vogue, and I could see something like this that's a bit more focused on atmosphere than anything else, and having simplistic usage of instrumentation, and augmenting the spaciousness with sounds. Again, to me, field recordings where I kind of go to, but given 79, they might have just brought some glass into the recording studio and smashed it up in front of a mic. So yeah, I don't know. It just feels like something that somebody would do today. And I think there's something really cool about coming upon something like this that, at least at the moment, feels kind of timeless. It doesn't feel like something that came from 79. Let me hit some lyrics, see what's going on there. Quick little bit of trivia. I'm discovering that there's only 2 albums by Joy Division. They released them a year apart, June of 79 and July of 1980. And then that's it. For a band as large as this, I feel like Joy Division is a pretty big name. I find it wild that they only have 2 albums. If anybody wants to give me some backstory to that, I mean, did they break up? And I guess that happens, right? I don't know. It kind of blows my mind. Lyrically, there's not a lot of things going on here, which makes sense. It's about using the least amount of information the most effectively as you can. This is just efficient writing, which I haven't really noted about the music, but it's absolutely true. The music does the bare minimum that it needs in order to be effective at what it does. And that's what really minimalistic composition is all about. Yeah, you can do a lot of stuff with a lot of stuff, but can you do a lot of stuff with a little bit of stuff? And I think that's one of the cool things about checking out this week is that I think we're 4 for 4 here of songs that don't have a lot of music to them, but are still really effective at what they're doing. And it just goes to show that you don't need a lot of stuff in order to do something that's affecting, that's effective. And the lyrics here are no different. We have a chorus. Interestingly, we don't do verse, chorus, verse, chorus. We do chorus, verse, chorus. Interesting little turn there. The chorus says, "We were strangers for far too long." That's it. Verse 1 talks about the space between two people. It says, "Me in my own world, and you there beside. The gaps are enormous, we stare from each side. We were strangers for too long." So I was in my world, you were in yours, and the space between us was enormous, and all we could do was stare at each other. Verse 2 mentions rage, which I think is interesting. Even the word here, it says violent, more violent. His hand cracks the chair, moves on reaction, then slumps in despair. Trapped in a cage and surrendered too soon, me in my own world, the one that you knew. The idea of being violent, of breaking inanimate objects, is 100% built into the music for that reason. Remember, I even talked about the fact that the glass breaking is an action of violence. It is destruction. And that idea showing up very deliberately in the lyrics, I think, is not a mistake. But the idea that he breaks this chair and then immediately recognizes it and slumps into despair, almost as if what he did surprised even him. And then once again falls into his own world, one that's different than this other person's, and then they were strangers again. There's a lot of annotation on this track. But apparently it has to do a bit with the singer and his wife and the distance that they had between them. He never really felt that they had a strong relationship, at least not in this point in it anyways. And I guess he did react violently to stuff. I guess he was depressed. And this was one of the ways that his depression acted out of him. Is he would retract into his own world, but he could have these outbursts. And that's what this song is about. It's just about feeling distanced from the person you should feel closest to. And through that lens, it's a very personal song. Without the annotations, I might have guessed that this was a song about a relationship, but it also doesn't really lean too far into that through the vocabulary. The idea that we were strangers for too long could be two people, but it could be groups of people. It could just talk about a division between anything, or any group of people, honestly. And so through that lens, it becomes a very personal song for the vocalist, one that needs a little bit more information into their life to really get the most out of, which is honestly where these genius annotations are most helpful for me. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Joy Division's I Remember Nothing. What did you think of this song? Anything that stood out to you? Anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? I had a couple of questions in there if you'd like to answer them as well. Put all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps up for this one, but we do have a special selection coming up next. Otherwise, I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to continue on with this week's theme. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.